Welcome to the Strong Bull Podcast, where serious athletes come to get after it. No shortcuts, no nonsense, proven methods backed by real science and training that hits hard. With over 40 years of combined experience, we're here to help you train smarter, lift heavier, and stay ahead of the game. Thanks for listening. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Strong Bull Podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and subscribing. We've had a lot of fun doing these over the last few weeks. We appreciate everybody giving the feedback. We look forward to continue to push out a bunch more of these. So I'm Dom Dixon. I got my boy Rob Dela Cruz here, and we are going to cover a topic today that Rob just posted about on his Instagram. And we're going to talk about, the difference between planned variation and constantly varied, and are they the same? So Rob, I'm going to let you take this one away because it's fresh in your mind. You just wrote about this in a caption. Great post, by the way. So tell me, your thoughts on this. Let's start with planned variation, which is something we both love.
Yeah, when I first put it up and I was thinking about it, is that variation is good. So that's not, but when it's constantly varied, that you got to be careful with that. Now, can they be the same thing? It's like, yeah, you can constantly plan to vary your movements, but most of the time they're not. And there's a lot of pushback with the people that like constantly varied. They tell you it's not random, and that's fine that it's not random. But when you have planned variations, you're moving through things from week to week, and you have progressions that you're using.
Yeah.
Because the one thing with planned variation, you get to practice
exactly
those movements over and over again, and you get to progress those movements. That's really important. So when you have constantly varied, you might not see, let's just use like a back squat or a bench, but you might not see that movement, which that's a pretty good skilled movement. For weeks. And then, so if you don't touch those movements over and over and have that repeated bout with them, it's really hard to refine those skills. For anybody.
Absolutely. Now,
when you're changing that stimulus up all the time, moving around, you don't expose your body long enough to it to get what you're looking for, the adaptation from it.
Now, with that being said, you've probably, you've been doing this for a long time with training, and you've seen probably, a lot of different programs that are kind of geared around, like for instance, Westside Barbell. It's planned variation over an extended duration of time, and they visit that specific skill or movement weeks apart, right? But the things you do in between, people may think it's constantly varied. No, it's planned variation, because we may back squat week 1, right? It's almost like a testing meter, and then you won't see it again until week 4, but you'll do several variations of back squatting throughout weeks 1, 2, 3, and then leading up to 4 again. Is that something you think that is
that's planned variation?
Planned variation. Okay. Now, some people will argue and say, okay, well, isn't that constantly varied because you're not doing the same thing and it's spread out? And my opinion, no. I mean, it is planned variation because it's a map, right? It's a map from one destination to the other.
Yes. So that's where it can kind of get like muddy a little bit, and you can say, well, that is constantly varied because you're constantly varying the movements, but it's in progression. Which is a much more planned variation. When you're looking at, when most of the people with constantly varied, you see a bench press 1 week and then you don't see it for 3 weeks. And I mean, they might have some pushing movements, but it's kind of like, hey, you're not going to work. And there's always a hierarchy to exercises too. They're like, if you can back squat really well, you can probably wall ball pretty decent. But if you can wall ball decent, doesn't necessarily mean you can back squat really well. It just doesn't work that way, regardless of the argument that they kind of say. On there. Also, is when you're going. So, for instance, there's a variation. So Monday is back squatting. You start out with 5x5s, and then at whatever RPE or percentage. Then the next Monday you're back squatting again, but now you have a higher percentage or RPE. So that's a variation.
It is, absolutely.
But now let's say your secondary movements are a pull and push. So then you have a seal row with a barbell, and then you have a bench press with a barbell. Well,
Yeah.
week one, you did the seal row with the barbell and the barbell and the bench press. Week two, you did a hex bar or trap bar,
Yeah.
and then the next time you did a dumbbell, and then so now those are planned variations
Yeah.
the whole time.
Now, when you say, 'cause this is the way I train, and I'm sure we probably think very similar. We aren't like we were not married to the exercises, right? But the variation is where we get our creativity in. So we look at it like you just said, like we may switch our row from a barbell to a hex bar, but in our head, we're looking at it, the motion and the actual stimulus is what we're looking for. So the actual mechanism of the exercise. I'm trying to do some form of a horizontal pull in today's session, right? Is that what you mean by like
Correct.
where you can get
Correct.
creative at is interchanging the movements, but keeping the actual motion the same, like the stimulus.
Correct.
Okay.
And you get better at that specific exercise in
Yeah.
that motion, but the said principle.
Yeah.
If you want to get better and stronger at the back squat, which you believe that's going to carry over to most things, which
Yeah.
upper level strength does carry over to most things,
Yeah.
then you got back squat.
Absolutely. I
And
can,
you could vary it like with the conjugate, like you talked about,
yeah.
but you still got a back squat and you still got to progress it for week after week after week
Yeah.
for at least 3 to 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And some people go further, but at least.
Yeah. Now, this is a question for my own personal gain, just to see your insight. With plan variation, do you feel that that is more beneficial for the primary movement, right? Like, so your back squat, your bench press, your deadlift, your overhead press. Do you think it's more beneficial to do that in your primary movement, is what we call primaries, versus your accessory movements?
Yes.
Personally, I do get a little creative and I do constantly vary accessory movements. Anybody who follows my page sees that I do a ton of constantly vary accessory movements, but my principles are always a knee bend, a horizontal pull, a horizontal, like those never change. Like you're always going to see those, but you may see 15 to 20 variations of a lunge on my page on my way I train, which is just, it's my own ADHD with training, but I always have the principles of planned variation. I'm going to do my pressing, my lunging, my squatting, all those things are all going to be planned in some accordance. I'm sure people looking at it like, oh, I never see you do back squat. I never see you do just normal bench press, right? So what would you say to somebody? First of all, do you agree with that? And second of all, do you think that that's something that is beneficial, or do you think it's more so harming?
I totally agree with it. And so I'm going to elaborate a little more on her. So we're going to have a plan. And so then we're going to progress these movements. And they're going to be weekly touched, probably pretty close to the same days over and over again.
Yeah.
So that's planned variation.
Yeah.
So constantly varied is like, hey, I did this workout of whatever legs, push, pull.
Yeah.
And then that was on Monday. And then 2 weeks from now is like a Friday, like it's like
Yeah.
it's all over the place. So Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays is my strength, and you're almost doing similar movements, but they might be varied.
Yeah.
That's planned variation.
Gotcha.
That's always you're always gonna be able to have skill development with that. There's a ton of progressive overload you're gonna be able to do, and then with long-term consistency.
Yeah.
The things are all moved around, and then one day is this, and then the next day it's a week and a half later
Yeah.
or something for the same movement. You're not going to get much consistency, and then you're not going to get much practice and be able to progressively overload that.
Yeah.
I think like everybody knows now that we kind of look at it, even though there's still some people that like push back, that you got to touch the movements over and over, and it needs to be some kind of plan.
It has to be. Yeah. Um,
and progression. There has to be progressive overload on stuff.
you kind
And I
of,
love the way you program.
yeah, and I appreciate it. You too, man. I learned from the best. But you kind of touched on my next question with the downfall to constantly varied, right? Like what if people listening right now, I'm sure people are like, okay, like all this sounds great. And I think, after hearing us talk, you do gotta have planned variation. But for those of the people out there who are constantly, in that sport or in that practice of going to the gym, not knowing what to do, and they are literally constantly doing constant variations of just randomness. What do you think is the biggest downfalls for them, and what do you think they've been experiencing over the last couple of years with that constantly varied training?
Well, one is at first it seems like it works.
Yeah, the novelty of it.
Yes, and you got to remember everything kind of works in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Some things work a little longer,
Yeah,
but it's all going to have its plateaus. Then you're going to have a plan,
yeah.
and then the variations are going to have to be planned out.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just not going to be just random or constant. And a lot of people argue that it's not random, but like the progression comes from practice
Yeah,
and being able to touch stuff over and over again.
yeah, absolutely.
That's about, like, I would say that's probably like number one most important. When you're doing constantly varied, and like a really good programmer in constantly varied, it's going to have planned variation, and
Yeah,
you're going to be exposed to the movement over and over again, and you're
yeah,
going to be able to practice it, and it's going to be set up in an ideal environment to be able to practice it.
yeah. Now, your experience, do you feel, kind of playing the other side, is there a downfall to people doing the same planned variation over and over again over a long extended period of time?
Yes, that's where you go into like training templates or training phases or blocks or meso or microcycles, and how you have them all set up. You could call it whatever you want.
Yeah,
But what I've seen over time after training a lot of people in a facility and working with a lot of people over the years is like 6 week blocks to 8 week blocks are about as long as
yep,
I want to put someone in the movements before and now
yeah,
it's not even just like physiological, what's the best. It's kind of like mentally,
yeah,
are they going to stay engaged that long?
yeah.
Right about the 4 to 5 week, you're starting to squeeze out about everything you're going to get out of that movement,
Mm-hmm.
and then mentally they're going to be checked out.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
find like 6 weeks for the main stuff that you work on in a training phase is about as long as you go,
Yep.
and then it's time to kind of get out of it. I try to explain this to people, especially athletes. They run into this because they'll just keep on touching. Because like what you do is you'll start ramping up, and you'll have like you PR'd your press or your squat or whatever it is,
Yeah,
and so then you want more because it felt easy.
yeah, exactly.
You want to move out of something before you're forced to move out of it.
Love it.
Because if you're forced to move out of it, then you can't come back for a long time. But
Yeah,
if you moved out of it and you felt like you had more room,
yeah,
and then you go work on mostly unilateral and strengthen hips up and get everything, and then you come back in 4 to 6 weeks,
yeah,
you'll have so much. One, you will be at like a higher level as
yeah,
far as where you're starting, and then two is your potential. Your base is so much bigger.
yep,
But if you're forced out of it because of an injury or some kind of nagging pain, then you can't come back.
yeah,
And that could be who knows how long.
yeah,
And I've seen that. Don't stay in it until you get forced out of it. Get out of it before. You
absolutely.
almost want to get out of it when you think you have so much more left.
Yeah, yeah, because it
And
gives you.
that's why I like leave those training phases at 6 weeks. It's like, oh man, we were just getting stronger. And like, that's okay. If we do, if you program
Yeah,
right after that, the proper stuff, you come back, you're going to be right there. You're going to have a new set point.
absolutely. No, I agree. I think a lot of people do spend, like you said, it's so comfortable. It's almost like that dopamine release when you get it the first time. You're like, I got to go back because I want to feel that again. And then you go back and it's not quite there. So you keep digging some more. You keep beating that dead horse. And like you said, before you know it, you're upside down and you're like, I have to get out. I have no choice now to get out, but to get out of it.
Or yeah, or you just got hurt and now you're out. I mean,
Exactly.
listen, I have done that way too many times in my lifetime and
Yeah,
learned lessons,
absolutely.
like the hard lessons, long, long time
Yeah,
ago with that.
absolutely. I remember when I first started CrossFit, I I'm not joking. I probably snatched every single day. I just
Yeah,
until I got a PR. I hit that PR and I was like, oh, I'm going right back. And then I never touched a weight close to the weight I hit ever again because I obsessed over it and I got to the point to where I never could do the same snatch because I did it so much that I was, like you said, forced out of it. But I think a lot of people do that too, especially you're listening right now. You're probably, most of us are either competing in CrossFit or around CrossFit, or in some form of sport. And you kind of go back to what you know, right? You keep beating that dead horse. Before you know it, you're upside down. Like you said, you're hurt or you can't get the same stimulus you once had at something. So
No, the one thing with the barbell too is people want to remember I love the barbell, but it hides imbalances
yeah,
and also sometimes can create it. So if you stay in them too long,
yeah,
it's hard to see it. And yes,
absolutely.
if you program right, you got unilateral work and you should be able to see it. But really, when you have a limited amount of time, you're only going to be able to do so much. And I think it's a really good idea to step away from the barbell or really heavy lifting and then get into more unilateral works slash like specific single leg and single arm.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. All right, guys, you heard it here first. If you are, looking at your training templates, or you're looking at programming, or you even write your own program, it's extremely important, guys, to have that plan variation. Constantly varied is okay if you want to dabble in it every once in a while, but having a bird's eye view of your training and having a plan, even if that plan doesn't go as according to, still having a plan, you're going to be a lot better off with your training. All right, guys, thanks for listening.